Let me hear your bar. Let me see you bite. Let me see your scar. You know what we about. Come see us in the yard. This is war. Golden Ripper hard. Dogs in the house. 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 Dogs in the house.
Hello and welcome to All We Hear is Purple. We're the third or fourth most mediocre Husky football podcast on the internet. I'm Andrew Berg. Today we have a recruiting signing day special. So we're joined today by our two recruiting writers, our two recruiting experts, gurus. First, Luke Kemper. Luke, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing good, celebrating my favorite collegiate national holiday.
If only it was actually a holiday that nobody had to work. And also, Aaron Sieverkropp. Aaron, how are you doing?
I am good, a little tired. This time of year, I'm always excited for this day, and then I'm relieved about the next day because then I can rest.
Yes, it's exactly right. It is, there's a lot that of build up to it. And we've had some years where the signing day was a little bit bland. Certainly like the Chris Peterson period, we didn't really do a lot of surprise commitments or decommitments at the end. Almost nobody ever decommitted. Things are a little bit different with Jed Fish, and we'll get into that. But let's start. Everybody knows the names of the players in the class, or by and large can look them up pretty easily. So we're going to do some superlatives, some of our favorites, some of our biggest surprises, things that we're just interested in from this recruiting class. Let's start out with a personal favorite player from the class. Luke, I'll go to you first. We'll kind of alternate as we go through. But who is your personal favorite player from this class for the Huskies?
I mean, there's a lot of really talented players that I'm quite excited about, but I'd be lying and remiss to say if it wasn't Champ Talea. I mean, he was just one of the first really big wins of the class in general. And watching his film, it's just so easy to see why he was so coveted. He's already just built at 6'4", 325, but he moves around so easily. He can reach the second level with extreme ease. I think he played mostly left tackle in high school, but I mean, he was just erasing guys down the field, and he's downright nasty when it comes to blocking, just punishing guys and pancaking them on almost every play. And I'm not normally a big fan of playing O lineman as freshman, but I think he'll be really in the thick of things as soon as he steps on campus to be pushing for playing time.
Yeah, he isn't probably of that offensive line class looks like the one with the highest upside, and that is extremely needed for this team right now, as we saw over and over again. How about you, Aaron? Is there a personal favorite from this recruiting class?
Well, Luke and I should have rock, paper, scissors because I actually was going to say Champ Talalele,
I
but
picked Champ because I thought for sure you would actually take.
I am actually going to take Zadrius Rainey Saleh for the sole reason of getting the state's number one prospect and planting a flag per se in state. Also, when you watch his film, he makes plays all over the field. Obviously, I have lots of favorites, but I would just say because of the importance of in-state recruiting, recent history, and then just talent level and the need at linebacker, and he can play edge. Um, as of this moment, it could change in 5 minutes, but I will just stick to Zadrius Rainey Saleh.
Yeah, I picked
ZRS is
Champ because I thought for sure you would pick Dylan Robinson here.
oh, Robinson's a fun one. A 6'3" cornerback with blazing speed is always an interesting thing to add. But yeah, ZRS was kind of a statement of intent too. The fact that he was committed to the previous staff, decommitted, and there was this very hot battle for him up to the last minute, and then he ended up choosing the Huskies again. Was a really good sign early on for Jed Fish's recruiting, and they were able to kind of take that forward. We're going to do kind of a snake draft style, so Luke doesn't steal every one of your picks, Aaron. So I'll go to you next. Um, let's go to our biggest surprise from the recruiting cycle. Is there anything, either a player or a theme or something that happened in this recruiting cycle that really caught you off guard a little bit?
I would say two things, and I'll make it brief on the two things since it's two. I was pretty surprised when we lost Vanderplug, especially with his connections to the staff. We were one of his first offers. Um, Despite the late offers from other schools, I really thought that we were going to hang on to him, and I kind of had the hope that Coach Fisch and his staff wouldn't have any decommitments heading down the stretch. So that was personally surprising to me. Maybe I'm naive. The second thing that's surprising in the 2025 class is the lack of defensive line bodies. Obviously, we took two defensive linemen. One is projected, Caleb Smith, to grow into a defensive line. I just thought that there would be a heavier push, despite the fact that it's light out west, to get more high school defensive linemen, especially knowing that it takes years for those guys to develop. We don't have a ton of bodies in there. I mean, we have some bodies, but we're graduating two of our starters this year, so that's kind of honestly a surprise for me.
Yeah, that's fair. I think they definitely tried, and this class would look a lot different if they'd been a little bit more successful on even like one of those high-end interior defensive linemen, because you could project having a true starter at that position over the next few years, whereas now it's up to the transfer portal and spending money there. But we'll get into that later. Luke, were you going to say those exact same two things?
No, no, I don't want to steal any thunder here. My big surprise overall was just the size of the class. I mean, we up until pretty recently they had that restriction of 25 for and for UW they rarely even hit that number. They were closer on average to about 22. So to sign 30 was a big surprise that number one, we were able to get that many commitments, but two, willing to take 30 commitments. I know that in the wake of DeVore leaving, there was a lot of attrition on the roster and there's a lot of holes to fill. But even with the scholarship limit increasing to 105 from 85, I didn't think that we would try and ramp up to that so quickly. Fisch has said that he thinks it's only going to be 85, but I'm not seeing that. I think that there'll be less transfers out than that maybe the staff is really projecting. And I think he might have mentioned the number in the press conference today, but it is not cheap to be putting in more scholarship players past your 85 limit. I mean, yes, you're paying for their tuition, but I mean, there's a bunch of stipends. There's room and board, not only that you're giving away for free, but you have to factor in the amount of room and board you're taking away from someone who would be paying tuition and all that loss of revenue. He said a really outrageous number that I don't truly believe is accurate. I think he said 2.2 million, which
For one player?
yeah, that's
No,
what seems so crazy about that. Maybe it was about the entire up and area. Is that how you interpret that?
No, I think it was going up to the full 105.
Okay, that makes much more sense. But I did the
Yeah.
math before, and it was way up there. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars per person. But yeah,
Yes.
that's why when I heard that 2.2, I was watching updates on the side for who was signing. I was like, what? I had to do a double take on that 2.2 million figure. But yeah, the size of the class, definitely a big surprise for me.
If we're spending $2 million on a second punter, I do have questions about the resource allocation. But yeah, there's definitely going to be some players headed out, but whether or not, I think we were kind of doing some back of the envelope math, and it looked like we're going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of like 9 to 10 to 11 guys over the scholarship limit going into the transfer portal. So you think like that doesn't mean that there's 10 guys headed out. It means there's 10 more guys headed out than are coming in, and we're definitely going to take some players to the transfer portal. So this does look like kind of the first step in a pretty big roster reshaping, which was probably due to happen anyway. Like you have new coach's first year, and he came in at a point in the year where he doesn't really have as much control over changing the roster. Brought a bunch of players from Arizona, got some commitments to come with him, but it's not the same as having a full recruiting and transfer cycle to kind of encourage the guys you're not going to use to go elsewhere and bring in some that are more or better fits for your style of play. We'll keep moving through. Let's talk a little bit. This might actually end up being related a little bit to the favorite players, but let's talk a little bit about the player who you think is most likely to see playing time next year. And I don't mean like might sneak into a game on special teams, but somebody who might become part of the regular rotation. Luke, we'll go back to you this time.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to snipe from Aaron already again, and stealing his favorite players, who I think is probably going to see the most significant playing time of this class right away. And that's Dangerous Rainy Soleil. I mean, with Bruner and Tupatala graduating, there's this huge vacuum at the linebacker position. Not only from two starters are gone and now there's two open spots, but just the collegiate game experience in general. I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say at this point, Kamari House is probably penciled in as a starter. I mean, he's played pretty dang well in his opportunities so far this year, and he's gotten more and more snaps as a result of his continual growth at the position. But with the caliber of athlete that ZRS is, I think he does have a real shot, honestly, even as a true freshman, of winning the job. And if he doesn't, he's still probably going to crack two deeps and see significant playing time. The room in general is pretty thin with the graduation of Bruner, Tupatala, and Drew Fowler as well. So there's definitely a lot of young guys in the room. Signing three linebackers this year definitely does help. But I think between House, is it Devin Bryant, and who's the Michigan transfer?
That's Moore, Hayden Moore.
Yeah, and Hayden Moore. I mean, there's really not a lot of true playing time at the collegiate level between them at this point.
Yeah, very true. Just look at the depth chart. That's a good pick. Aaron, anybody else that it jumps out at you as a candidate?
I'll give you two. One is just a layup, like a legit layup. Dusty Zimmer, the punter from Australia, is probably, if I was a betting guy, I would bet my house that he's going to be the starting punter next year for us. Otherwise, why would they bring in a scholarship punter, right? And force Jack McAllister to leave. The second player, and making it a little bit more interesting, I would say, besides ZRS, Rylan Dillard Allen, because of the lack of depth in the safety room, and just because of his speed and how much the coaches love and targeted him, is a player that will see the field a lot as a freshman. And I think he will also crack the two deeps and challenge for starting playing time. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if he develops into a Taylor Rapp type player.
Yeah, sort of ball hawk.
That's pretty exciting. Zimmer, I mean, I haven't even seen tape of him yet. You're exactly right. Like if we have one punter and and it's him and we give him a scholarship, but he's also 6'5", 230. Whenever there's a giant kicker, it just looks so. I love seeing that. And Australian rules players coming into play to punt are just like an all-time favorite of mine. This goes back to the early days of the podcast, and Gaby and I would talk about how much we love Australian punters, and so this is a big victory in the recruiting area for me. Let's keep going. We're going to talk a little bit about guys who have a chance to exceed their recruiting rankings. So out of the group of 3-star recruits, and obviously some guys are 3 stars by one service and 4 by another and so on, but define it however you like. But the 3-star recruit who you think is most likely to develop into an all-conference player one day. And Aaron, we can start with you on this one again.
Well, I feel like both me and Luke are going to have similar answers. So I guess maybe I'll just take one of the two players that we're probably both thinking about. And I'll just say Desmond Roebuck, the wide receiver out of Marana, I think is how you pronounce it. I've never actually said his high school out loud. But a 5'10", 170-pound wide receiver, Arizona's top receptions all-time leader in the state, which is a massive achievement considering how many good wide receivers have come out of that state, including Nikhil Harry, Christian, the player that played at Texas A&M that's now in the NFL, Christian Kirk.
Kirk, yeah, yeah.
Roebuck seems like a player who is going to develop into a coach's favorite at some point and be one of those security blanket guys that is always open, similar to like a Tyler Lockett in college.
Oh, yeah, I can get behind that. Not the biggest guy, but if he can find himself getting open all the time, that is nice. Certainly an avenue for playing time that way. Luke, how about you?
I'm going to go with one of our hidden gems of the class, and that's Dominic Macon. And as Aaron mentioned, we didn't take who we would really have loved necessarily at the defensive line. We only took two guys, and between the two, he's definitely the more ready to play that interior at 6'3", 305. And he's at a really small school in Oregon in Happy Valley. Adrian C. Nelson, I think it's only been a legitimate football program high school for only like 2 or 3 years. It's really new. So at a program like that, he's definitely not going to get a lot of attention from I don't know, like the bigger programs, the Power Four, like programs like Cal. You would think would be still like, oh, we're on the prowl for a defensive lineman as well, or a UCLA or programs of that caliber. But at such a small school, he just wasn't getting that attention. But when he hit the camp circuit this summer, I mean, the coaches at UW just fell in love with him. They were pretty much giving him one-on-one coaching the entire time he was there, and they were salivating over this guy. And after they offered him seeing him in person, they were just full court pressing him the entire time. And he was like, oh, I want to go play my senior year. I want to go collect some more offers. I want to actually enjoy my recruitment. And I'm not even going to take official visits until the fall. And then the coaches just kept pressing him and got him to take a visit the final weekend of the summer official visit period, got him to commit shortly after. And I think that they feel probably the same way that Peterson and his staff felt when they found Nick Harris for the first time and said, we don't want you to go anywhere else. We don't want anyone else to see you. We know what we got here and we want you. I mean, he moves so well for 305. I mean, if he can turn into a true pass rush threat through the interior, I mean, that's just going to wreak havoc in any system that you put him in. So those are the kind of guys that not only catch the attention of offensive coordinators in your conference, but also the scouts of the NFL.
Yeah, yeah. I think that one makes sense. He's much needed. Hopefully he does exceed that rating because it was not a good year, as Aaron mentioned earlier, for interior defensive linemen on the West Coast. Even some of the guys we were battling for were more like in Texas or further east than that. Um, and it's hard to win recruiting battles like that. I mean, Chase Sims is a good example. We were kind of in it till the end with him from Texas, and he ended up at Texas A&M. Uh, that was probably kind of like the highest rated interior defensive lineman we had a realistic chance at, other than
talk about
Sharma.
skyrocketing in the
Yeah,
rankings at the end. He jumped 543 spots for his final ranking.
wow. Yeah, nice stat to have at hand too. And Sharma was the other one we were in on from the beginning. Had him committed at one point under DeBoer. He bounced around. I think he was committed to Oregon at one point, and then ended up with Texas. I don't know if he actually formally committed to Oregon, but was
no, he formally committed, and it was the only miss that Brandon Huffman of 247 had for his crystal ball's entire cycle.
Oh, interesting.
Because everyone thought
he would ultimately that he would end up at Oregon.
Well, they didn't. Nobody thought he was going to Oregon because everyone thought he was going to Texas. They surprised everyone by picking Oregon, but didn't last too long anyway, since he ended up picking Texas, flirted with USC at the end, right before signing day. But he did sign with the Longhorns today.
That is very confusing. That he had committed to Oregon, and everyone projected him to flip back. But yeah,
he was also a Husky commit. under DeBoer. So
Yeah,
he's been committed
well,
to 3 different teams.
That
yeah,
was at
since
the
he
point where
was,
he was listed
yeah,
as an offensive lineman, and nobody was
that's
quite sure where he was going to play. But
that's
uh,
very true. Yeah.
it was a long time ago. So, well, while we're talking about that, I think that exact topic may play into this next question. I want to hear from you about what was your biggest disappointment from this recruiting cycle. It could, again, be a player, a position group, but a theme that you saw overall. Luke, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, we kind of just touched on it a little bit, and Aaron mentioned it earlier as well. Losing 2 commits to Oregon, that always stinks. I mean, I understand that Oregon's a recruiting juggernaut and they're the number 1 team in the country. They got their engine rolling right now, but it's just always a hard pill to swallow, losing commits flipped to your rival, especially when they're 2 of your highest rated players. It's just never fun to deal with.
Yeah, no doubt about that. It is. I have not done the like going through the entire class and just looking at the players they ended up signing because it's too depressing to do. Typically, I'll at least look at like our class side by side with theirs, but this is not the year to um, do that deep dive. I don't think I'm just going to ignore it and pretend like it doesn't exist. At least for now, I'll get over it. Aaron, I have a feeling I know where you're going with this one, and I think I agree with it. But go ahead. What was most disappointing for you?
Well, if you want to piggyback on what you just said, if you want to compare the UW's commitment list to Oregon's, what I would have you look at is the offensive lineman weight of our class versus Oregon. That might be where we have the advantage over
Especially if
them.
you just do it in cumulative, since we signed like 6 offensive linemen. I think we have a metric ton of offensive linemen coming in.
Yeah, I mean, again, just the bodies on the defensive line is probably the biggest disappointment. Again, it was pretty shallow in the West, but I will say there are defensive linemen out there, and I think it's there are guys that want to come out west and play. USC just got a defensive lineman from Louisiana. So it's not impossible to get defensive linemen, but if there are top tier defensive linemen on the West Coast, I would hope in future years that we would be more of a factor in their recruitment. We're not
Yeah,
going to land them
totally
all, but
fair.
we can't whiff on all of them.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And hopefully we can do, I mean, this year with a little bit more depth in that West Coast footprint, not go over again. Or we didn't go over, but go for somebody who's not just a projection candidate, somebody who already looks like somebody who's likely to become a starter or a high end starter at that. Uh, one more uh, of these looking kind of at questions, a superlative looking at what comes next. What is our biggest remaining personnel need in the transfer portal? Aaron, you can go first on this one.
Well, I guess piggybacking on what I just said,
There's a
defensive
theme.
line.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's a surprise to anyone. I think just based on numbers, the guys that we're losing, what's left in the room, we have several guys coming off the injury. I will be very, very surprised if we do not bring in 2 starting caliber defensive linemen at least. I mean, I don't see us probably taking 3 or 4, but we should, if we have a set budget of X amount of dollars, we should be giving a vast majority of that to not only the offensive line, but also the defensive line to bolster the defensive line for next year. Otherwise, we will be atrocious at stopping the run again.
Yeah. Um, no doubt about that. Luke, either echo that or is there a 1B answer for biggest transfer need?
Yeah, that was actually my 1B. I think 1A has to be offensive tackle. I mean, in addition to needing to infuse more top end talent at the position to a starting caliber player, we just need depth, period. I mean, there were multiple times this year we were playing the 3rd string on our left tackle due to injury. And they had to see pretty significant snaps throughout the season. And it showed just how important it is to have quality depth at the position.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a few places you can kind of see just looking at the depth chart, like a number 2 receiver next to Denzel Boston is a must. It maybe not the biggest need compared to offensive and defensive tackle, because you can, if you don't get somebody there, you're plugging in like Rashid Williams, who probably does have that upside to get there eventually, but you'd probably like to kind of ease him into that rotation rather than just throwing him in as a Big Ten number 2 receiver. Um, there are probably some needs at linebacker. We talked earlier about how thin that group is and how ZRS has a path to immediate playing time. But I think you're both right that the number 1 and number 2 are find 1 and probably 2 starters at both offensive tackle and defensive tackle. And that is not going to be easy to do. That is, there are going to be a lot of schools after every one of those candidates. So,
Very
um,
expensive thing to
yeah,
do.
Luke is making the money sign. I'm going to give him a technical foul. It's highly illegal to impugn the
Oh dear.
referee's credibility by making the money sign. Um, Last thing, this is going back to the start of the recruiting season. Jed Fisch said he wanted this to be Washington's best recruiting class ever. He didn't really go into a lot of detail about what that meant. We kind of joked about it, scoffed about it. It is the biggest recruiting class, at least that I think any of us can remember. How would you say he did living up to that goal? I mean, it was an aspiration. I don't think anybody believed this was going to be like a national top 10 recruiting class. But for each of you, how would you say he just evaluate the recruiting class overall relative to his goal of being the best recruiting class ever? Luke, go ahead.
Well, since Coach gave that answer, I'm going to give my own coach speaking answer as well. And that's, oh, we can't judge it based off of just the rankings off of recruiting sites. We'll know the true impact of this class 3 or 4 years down the road when they're actually playing and being able to contribute on the field. Then we can judge if it was the true class ever. I mean, I'm sure that if he was forced to answer it right now, that's exactly what Coach would be saying.
How about you, Aaron? A less political answer.
Yeah, I mean, so before I answer that question, I think it would be fun for us every year to look back at the class 4 years ago and see what the hit rate on every class was, or that class, and we could kind of go through and track it. I used to do that back in the day, and walk through with friends and be like, "Hey, this player hit, this player hit, this didn't, this didn't." That's really the gauge of like how successful a class is. But um, if I was, we kind of talked about this in our chat. If I was going to give it a grade versus the benchmark that Jed Fish said, I would not give him the best class ever. It would probably be somewhere in between best class ever and obviously worst class ever, or somewhere in the B category. It's got a lot of depth, and there could be a lot of potential starters. But do I see any like potential or several like top 10, top 15 picks in this class? I don't know, like right now at this moment, if I could say that. Some other classes, the Coach Sark class with Kaysen and ASJ, I could probably say that. So, that's kind of the answer to the question. It's not the best class ever, biggest class ever, but we will have to look at it a couple of years down the road to see if it was the best class ever.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. You mentioned looking back at the class 4 years ago. If this might be a fun exercise to do on the UW Dog Pound at some point in the next few weeks. The 2020 class was an interesting one. There a lot of ups and downs. It had both Romo Dunze and Jalen McMillan in it, so it was a good class. Whatever else happened, but this is fascinating. I don't know if this might be too deep of a pull, but we only offered 3 quarterbacks in that class. Can you guess, either of you guess any of the 3 quarterbacks?
For the 2020 class?
Yeah.
I think Ethan
Garbers was the one we signed, and probably why we stopped offering anyone, because we signed him very early.
Yeah.
I think the quarterback above him was Bryce Young.
Yes.
I feel like there
And
was one from Stanford too. What was the third one?
McKee? Was it? It
No,
wasn't
it's
McKee.
DJU Uangalele. Yeah, so
Ah.
it's just 3 very recognizable names. 2 of whom bounced around quite a bit. Garbers and DJU, and then Bryce Young obviously had his own very successful path
Yeah. We only
through and
offered
out of
three
college.
we only offered 3 quarterbacks this cycle as well, so very fitting.
Yeah, hopefully, hopefully, I would say hopefully it winds up as good, but none of those guys ever did anything for UW, so hopefully it winds up much better than that. Um, I want to do kind of a lightning round on some other topics. I know it's a recruiting special, but spend 2 or 3 minutes on some of the other news around Husky football. Uh, I don't really want to dwell on last week's loss to Oregon. It was what it was. It was kind of a lot of themes we saw elsewhere through the year. But Luke, give me your 30-second summary of that game and what you remember from it.
My 30-second summary is Xfinity/God clearly didn't want me to watch that game to protect my eyes and heart, so I did not get to enjoy the viewership/SmackDown courtesy of the Ducks.
Oh, not bad. I went back and watched it the next day. Although ironically, you mentioned that it was a SmackDown. It was the same night as WWE Survivor Series. Uh, not at the same time, but they both happened in the middle of the night for me in Europe. So I had to choose what I was going to watch first the next day. And I watched the Husky game first, but I watched it when it truly became out of hand, was moving through it pretty quickly and trying to kind of scrub through some of the plays and just seeing some of the offensive line just getting overwhelmed. It was, I mean, similar to the Penn State game, similar in some ways to some of the other games we played this year, but that is very obviously something that we need to fix. Okay, next question. I'll go to you, Aaron. We've got the Pac-12 championship game this week, Oregon against Penn State. What do you think are the chances that Penn State upsets Oregon this week?
I mean, I'll give my purple glasses answer and then my non-purple glasses answer.
75% chance.
So my purple glasses answer are they always got a chance, right?
Yeah.
They've got the talent on the offensive and defensive line. They can run the ball. My not so purple lenses is I think Oregon's talent is far superior to Penn State, and barring some coaching issues or major turnover issues, if the game just kind of happens like a normal game would, where in the third and fourth quarter the better team just dominates the other team, I would say that Oregon is unfortunately going to win that game. They're just too good on the lines.
Yeah, and if there is early in the season, there was a little bit of a wobble around their pass blocking. They had a little bit of trouble with that against Boise State. I think they played Idaho and didn't look all that good. But they're getting the ball out so quickly now. It's not really causing an issue. Like they're just not afraid to make these behind the line of scrimmage passes and let the receivers make plays, and it is causing problems for everybody they play. It seems like we're now at the point where we're likely to go to either the Sun Bowl in El Paso or the Vegas Bowl. Do either of you have a strong preference between the two of those?
I mean,
Sun
I
Bowl?
do, but I'm very biased on my answer, but I'll let Aaron go first.
Oh, were you going to say the LA Bowl because it's easier to get to? I was going to say the Sun Bowl just because of tradition and how many times we played there. I also think that honestly, we'll probably get a better opponent in the Sun Bowl than we will in the LA Bowl. Like LA Bowl, I think is pretty far down the hierarchy. I mean, we'll probably see more Husky fans there, but I don't know. I'd like to see us play like Oklahoma or some team like that in the bowl, like two traditional powers that kind of had a down year, and see if it'd be like the Jed Fisch rematch with Oklahoma from last year. So
Yeah. I think we would play an ACC team if we got to the Sun Bowl. I don't know who that would be. Maybe um, like a North Carolina State or somebody. Duke had a good year. Maybe that'd be where they would end up. That would actually
hopefully
be a
not
pretty fun game.
hopefully not California. That would be interesting. I don't know if California actually
I
made
don't know how that's gonna work with like
No, there's this weird agreement with the Bulls schedule still that we're still
yeah.
technically considered Pac-12, so Cal wouldn't fall into that ACC category.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that agreement goes for another 2 years, I believe.
Yeah, except for CFP purposes where it
Yeah.
is very strange. I also say the Sun Bowl just because I'm not traveling back to the US to go to either of these games, and I love how the Sun Bowl looks on TV. Like it's a very cool setting. Um and yeah, That's enough for me. I don't the Vegas Bowl playing it in the NFL stadium there. It looks pretty generic. Are they playing it in Allegiant now, or is it still at
Yeah,
Thomas? Or
yeah.
yeah. They
It's
used
an
to play it at
Allegiant.
the
Yeah.
UNLV stadium, but yeah, they moved it. Okay, let's wrap up on Husky Talk and get into our recommendations and plugs before we get out of here. Nice. Now that recruiting season is done and a few weeks off, you may have time to consume some other non-football related media. So, Luke, you have any recommendations?
I do. I have given a couple of cooking recommendations before, and I have another one this time as well. It is a content creator who goes by Your Barefoot Neighbor. I actually made my first recipe that he made a video on earlier tonight, and it turned out extremely delicious. So I'll be checking him out more in the future as well.
Very nice. All right. What did you make?
It was kind of like an orzo with Italian sausage and sun-dried tomatoes and spinach. Excellent.
Excellent. Sounds good. Aaron, anything you want to throw out?
Yes, this is not a paid promotion, and I do own stock of Costco, but I will throw out the fact that lots of people that I know, including myself, bought the Costco Thanksgiving dinner. And for the cool price of $38, it is a pretty good investment. You get a turkey, stuffing, gravy, mashed potatoes, and green beans. And it was delicious for the cool price of $38.
That's
It's not a pay
extremely cheap.
promotion, and I do own Costco stock. So I'm not
So
recommending anyone to buy Costco stock, but if you're looking to save time and money next year on a meal, the Costco turkey dinner is worth it.
is that prepared or is it you get the ingredients and you make it at home?
It is the only preparation that you have to actually do is the cooking time.
Okay.
So you got to throw the turkey in the oven for an hour and a half, I believe. The potatoes in for an hour. But not only did I have it bought it for my family the day after, but the house that I went to for Thanksgiving also had it without us talking to each other. So
Yeah.
yeah, again, not a paid
Yeah.
promotion, and I do own Costco stock. So for the SEC people that are going to be listening to this, please don't find me.
I don't know if we have a lot of SEC people listening to it, but I'm sure there are some, right? Um, I smoked a turkey this year. It was extremely good. It was not from Costco, but I highly recommend that if anybody has a good smoker, and then you turn it up for the last half hour just to get the skin a little bit crispy. Very good way to do it. My recommendation, we've been watching The Penguin on Max, the one with Colin Farrell in it. It's great. I'm not really a superhero person so much, but I do love the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, and this kind of feels like it's in that universe, but if there was no Batman, it's just the crime families. I also love Colin Farrell. Just like a dark, gritty crime show with like no good characters, just a bunch of awful characters. But super entertaining. All right, thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Luke. I appreciate you sticking with us after a busy day, busy signing day, busy recruiting season. We wanted to focus on recruiting this week, so we'll push the Cody Pickett interview out to another week. But in the meantime, thanks everybody for listening, and go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.